What compels a man to willingly give his life for a stranger in the Nazi death camps? The answer lies in the extraordinary figure of Saint Maximilian Kolbe, a Polish Franciscan priest whose heroic love for Christ and the Blessed Virgin Mary led him to perform the supreme act of Christian charity. His life, marked by unwavering devotion to the Immaculate Conception and tireless apostolic zeal, teaches us that even in the most adverse circumstances, the light of the gospel can shine with divine radiance, transforming suffering into a testament of faith and death into a gateway to eternal glory. Chapter 1. Early years in Poland. In the small village of Zdunska Wola, in the heart of Poland, on January 8, 1894, Raymond Kolbe was born, the second son of Julius and Mary Dabrowska. The Kolbe family, though of modest means, breathed an atmosphere of deep Catholic faith, a faith that would forever shape the soul of the future saint. Julius worked as a weaver, while Mary diligently devoted herself to the Christian education of her children, planting in their hearts the first seeds of love for God and their heavenly homeland. Poland at that time groaned under the yoke of three foreign powers that had dismembered the nation. Yet, in Catholic homes like the Kolbes, faith burned like an unquenchable flame, keeping alive the hope in divine providence. Young Raymond grew up listening to his mother's evening prayers, each night entrusting the fate of her family and her martyred country to the Blessed Virgin Mary. From an early age, young Raymond showed unmistakable signs of an extraordinary nature. His mother later recounted how, after a particularly mischievous prank, she saw the little boy prostrate before the image of the Virgin Mary, weeping bitterly and asking forgiveness with a sincerity that moved her heart. It was as if his childlike soul already understood the gravity of sin and the need for divine grace to remain on the path of righteousness. The games of young Raymond also revealed unusual inclinations for a child of his age. While others were entertained by worldly diversions, he organized impromptu processions, built little altars dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and delighted in listening to the lives of the saints that his pious mother recounted on long winter evenings. His heart seemed to beat already to the rhythm of a sublime vocation, which Providence patiently molded in the blessed clay of his childlike soul. The Kolbe family's material poverty contrasted sharply with the spiritual richness that reigned in that blessed home. Julius and Mary understood that the true inheritance they could bequeath to their children was not earthly possessions, but the faithful transmission of the Catholic faith and the burning love for Jesus Christ and his Blessed Mother. Thus, each day spent in that humble dwelling became a living lesson in Christian virtues, virtues that would forever mark the character of the future martyr of Auschwitz. Chapter 2. The Vision of the Crowns. When Raymond was only 10 years old, an event occurred that would forever change the course of his earthly existence. One afternoon, after being severely reprimanded by his mother for his pranks, the boy took refuge in the parish church, seeking solace before the Blessed Sacrament. There, prostrate in fervent prayer, he experienced a heavenly vision that would indelibly mark his spiritual destiny. The Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to him with maternal sweetness, holding in her immaculate hands two crowns of celestial radiance. One was white as freshly fallen snow, a symbol of angelic purity. The other, red as the blood of martyrs, representing heroic sacrifice for the faith. With a melodious voice that reached the depths of his childlike heart, the Mother of God asked him which of the two crowns he wished to receive. Little Raymond, moved by a supernatural inspiration that surpassed his young age, replied with admirable determination, "I want both, my mother." The Virgin smiled with maternal benevolence, and after nodding her blessed head, disappeared, leaving in the boy's soul an indescribable peace and the absolute certainty that his life would be entirely consecrated to the service of God and his Immaculate Mother. This mystical vision was not for Raymond a simple momentary consolation. but a prophetic revelation that would illuminate every decision of his future life. From that memorable day, the boy understood that he was called to a heroic holiness that would manifest itself both in the angelic purity of his life and in the generous offering of his blood for Christ. The white crown would guide him along the paths of perfect chastity and ardent love for the Immaculate One. The red crown would prepare him for the supreme witness of martyrdom. The secret of this heavenly vision remained hidden in the innermost depths of Raymond's heart for a long time. Only years later, when he had already embraced religious life, did he confide in some spiritual brothers this extraordinary grace he had received from the Queen of Heaven. However, the fruits of that apparition immediately manifested themselves in the radical transformation of his behavior. The mischievous child gradually became a young man of admirable recollection, entirely dedicated to prayer and study, unconsciously preparing himself for the sublime mission that divine providence had reserved for him in the eternal designs of his merciful love. Chapter 3. The Franciscan Calling. The years of Raymond's adolescence passed in a crescendo of religious fervor that astonished all who knew him. His soul, touched by divine grace since the vision of the crowns, naturally inclined towards everything that could bring him closer to God and his Blessed Mother. When the Franciscan friars arrived in his hometown to preach a popular mission, the young man felt in his heart an irresistible call to consecrated life under the rule of the poor man of Assisi. Franciscan spirituality, with its emphasis on evangelical poverty, profound humility, and ardent love for Christ crucified, resonated perfectly with the innermost aspirations of Raymond's soul. Saint Francis of Assisi, the saint of the stigmata and the mystical spouse of Lady Poverty, presented himself before his eyes as the perfect model to imitate for one who had received from the Virgin Mary the promise of the 2 crowns. Franciscan life offered the ideal setting to cultivate both angelic purity and preparation for martyrdom. In 1907, at just 13 years old, Raymond entered the Franciscan Minor Seminary in Lwów, accompanied by his older brother Francis, who also felt the religious calling. The separation from his family was painful, yet hopeful. The Kolbe parents understood they were offering God their most precious possession. Mary Dabrowska, that Holy Mother, blessed her son's departure with tears of joy, entrusting them to the maternal protection of the Immaculate Conception. The early years of religious life revealed in young Raymond an exceptional intelligence and a solid piety that edified superiors and fellow students. His professors were amazed by how easily he absorbed knowledge, but even more so by the spiritual depth he showed in prayer and meditation. It was as if his soul, prepared by grace since childhood, finally found the right environment to develop all the supernatural gifts God had placed within him. On September 4th, 1910, Raymond received the Franciscan habit at the Krakow convent, taking the religious name of Brother Maximilian. The clothing ceremony was a moment of immense spiritual joy for him. He felt he had finally found his true home on earth. The brown habit of St. Francis, cinctured by the 3-knotted cord, became the outward symbol of a total inner consecration to Jesus Christ and his Immaculate Mother, officially beginning the path that would lead him to heroic sanctity and glorious martyrdom. Chapter 4. Studies in Rome and Priestly Ordination. In 1912, Brother Maximilian was sent to Rome to complete his higher studies at the International College of St. Bonaventure, annexed to the Gregorian University. The Eternal City, the beating heart of Christendom, offered the young Polish Franciscan the opportunity to drink directly from the purest sources of Catholic doctrine and to strengthen his spirit in the contemplation of the sacred monuments that treasured the memory of martyrs and saints. The Roman years were decisive in the intellectual and spiritual formation of the future saint. Guided by eminent teachers, he delved into the mysteries of dogmatic theology, scholastic philosophy, and the history of the Church, always with the purpose of better knowing him, to whom he had entirely consecrated his life. His professors recognized in him an exceptional student, gifted with a privileged mind that admirably united the depth of thought with the simplicity of faith. During his stay in Rome, Brother Maximilian witnessed the attacks that the enemies of the faith launched against the Catholic Church. The anti-clerical demonstrations, blasphemous publications, and atheistic propaganda circulating in the streets of the city filled him with sorrow, but also ignited in his heart an ardent zeal to defend Catholic truth and extend the kingdom of Christ in souls. It was as if the vision of the 2 crowns he received in childhood now took on a more concrete and urgent meaning. On April 28, 1915, Brother Maximilian received priestly ordination from Cardinal Basilio Pompilj at the Church of St. Andrew of the Valley. On that memorable day, the young priest felt that God's will, manifested years before by the Blessed Virgin Mary, was perfectly fulfilled in him. His hands, consecrated to offer the holy sacrifice of the altar, had become instruments chosen for the salvation of souls and the glory of the Immaculate Conception. Shortly after his ordination, Father Maximilian obtained a doctorate in philosophy and later in theology, displaying uncommon erudition, always united with profound humility. His doctoral theses revealed not only a solid academic preparation, but also a mystical intuition that allowed him to penetrate divine mysteries with the simplicity of a child and the wisdom of a doctor of the Church. Rome had forged in him the wise and holy priest that Poland needed in those difficult times of war and social revolution. Chapter 5. The founding of the Militia Immaculatae. On October 16, 1917, the feast of St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, in a modest cell of the College of St. Bonaventure in Rome, a work destined to spread throughout the world and win millions of souls for Christ, was born. Father Maximilian, along with 6 fellow Franciscans, founded the Militia of the Immaculate Conception, an association of the faithful entirely dedicated to promoting devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary and combating the forces of evil that attacked Holy Mother Church. The inspiration for this apostolic work had matured in the young priest's heart during the preceding months, as he contemplated with sorrow the systematic attacks against the Catholic faith that were multiplying in Europe. Masonic lodges openly celebrated the bicentennial of their founding, parading through the streets of Rome with blasphemous banners depicting the Archangel St. Michael trampled under the feet of Lucifer. Faced with these sacrilegious acts, Father Maximilian's ardent soul could not remain passive. The Militia Immaculatae was born as a supernatural response to the challenges of the modern age. Its purpose was clear and sublime: to obtain, through the intercession of Mary Immaculate, the conversion of sinners, especially Masons, Protestants, schismatics, and pagans, through prayer, sacrifice, and Catholic apostolate. Members consecrated themselves entirely to the Blessed Virgin, committing to wearing the miraculous medal and spreading Marian devotion by all licit means at their disposal. The militia's program was summarized in a phrase of admirable simplicity: to win the whole world for the Immaculate. This goal, seemingly disproportionate for a group of young religious, was based on absolute trust in the power of intercession of she who had crushed the head of the infernal serpent. Father Maximilian understood that the Blessed Virgin Mary, as mediatrix of all graces, was the safest and quickest path to bring souls to Jesus Christ. The first statutes of the association were approved by the Superior General of the Franciscans, and soon adhesions began to arrive from seminarians and priests of various nationalities. The small seed planted in Rome germinated under divine blessing, preparing to become the leafy tree that would spread its branches across all continents. Father Maximilian sensed that this work was the instrument chosen by divine providence to fulfill the prophecy of Our Lady of Fatima. Finally, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. Chapter 6. The Return to Poland and the First Apostolates. In July of 1919, Father Maximilian returned to his homeland after a 7-year absence. Poland had regained its independence after centuries of captivity, but the wounds of war and internal divisions threatened national reconstruction. The young Franciscan priest carried in his baggage a treasure more precious than any material possession: the statutes of the Militia of the Immaculate, and a heart burning with apostolic zeal that would transform the spiritual life of his country. His first destination was the Franciscan convent in Krakow, where he immediately began preaching about devotion to the Immaculate Conception with an eloquence that captivated his listeners. His sermons were not mere theological dissertations, but living testimonies of a soul enamored of the Blessed Virgin Mary. He knew how to convey this love with words that reached the heart directly. The faithful flocked in multitudes to hear the priest of the Virgin, as they soon began to call him. Tuberculosis, a disease that had begun to undermine his health during his years of study in Rome, forced Father Maximilian to temporarily interrupt his apostolic activities. This suffering, far from discouraging him, became a precious offering united to the Passion of Christ for the conversion of sinners and the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. From his sickbed, he continued writing articles and letters to spread the Militia of the Immaculate among the Polish clergy and faithful. During his convalescence in Zakopane, a mountain resort famous for its healthy climate, Father Maximilian conceived the project that would revolutionize Catholic apostolate in Poland: the publication of a popular magazine entirely dedicated to the Immaculate Conception. This publication, which would bear the name The Night of the Immaculate, would be the privileged instrument for spreading Marian devotion throughout the country and forming a true crusade of souls consecrated to Mary. Despite the economic difficulties and the opposition of some confrères who considered the project chimerical, Father Maximilian persevered in his purpose with the tenacity of the saints. He knew that the work was not his own, but that of the Immaculate, and therefore it could not fail. With the help of some generous benefactors and the blessing of his superiors, he began preparations to launch the magazine that would become one of the most influential Catholic publications in Europe. Chapter 7. Niepokalanów, the City of the Immaculate. In January 1922, with practically non-existent resources but with unlimited confidence in divine providence, Father Maximilian launched the first issue of The Night of the Immaculate. The modest 8-page publication, printed on a borrowed printing press, contained articles on Marian devotion, lives of saints, and news about the Militia of the Immaculate. Few then imagined that this humble magazine was destined to reach print runs of over 1 million copies. The immediate success of the publication exceeded all expectations. Subscribers multiplied month after month, and letters of thanks arrived from every corner of Poland. Readers found in the magazine's pages not only religious instruction, but also spiritual comfort and guidance for sanctifying daily life. Father Maximilian had succeeded in creating an effective bridge between high theology and popular piety, presenting eternal truths in a language accessible to all the faithful. It soon became evident that the facilities of the Krakow convent were insufficient to house the growing publishing work. It was necessary to find a larger place where a modern printing press and the administrative offices of the magazine could be established. Divine Providence was already preparing the solution. Prince Druki Lubecki generously offered Father Maximilian a plot of several hectares near Warsaw, close to the Terezin station. In August 1927, Father Maximilian and 18 Franciscan brothers moved to the new site, which they had christened Niepokalanów, that is, City of the Immaculate. The place, which initially was nothing more than an uninhabited area with some precarious buildings, was destined to become one of the most important centers of Catholic apostolate in the world. Under the maternal protection of the Immaculate Conception, a city entirely consecrated to the glory of God and the salvation of souls began to be built. The first years in Niepokalanów were ones of heroic work and constant deprivation. The Franciscan brothers, united by a common ideal, worked from dawn until late at night, combining a life of prayer with editorial apostolate. Father Maximilian preached by example, being the first to rise for morning prayer and the last to retire after personally overseeing all aspects of the work. His motto, "Only the Immaculate," constantly resonated in Niepokalanów, reminding everyone that the true architect of that prodigious undertaking was the Blessed Virgin Mary. Chapter 8. The Night of the Immaculate, Magazine and Apostolate. The magazine, The Night of the Immaculate, quickly became an unprecedented publishing phenomenon in the history of Polish Catholicism. From the modest 5,000 copies of the first year, the print run rose vertiginously to reach the astronomical figures of 700,000 copies per month in 1930 and over 1 million in 1938. This extraordinary expansion was not due to modern advertising techniques, but to the supernatural power of Catholic truth presented with clarity and love. The secret of its success lay in the inspiration that guided each issue of the magazine. Father Maximilian did not limit himself to offering pious readings, but presented a complete program of Christian life centered on devotion to the Immaculate Conception. The articles dealt with both the great doctrinal truths and the practical problems of daily existence, always with the luminous perspective of the Catholic faith and the maternal intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Testimonies of conversions wrought through reading The Night of the Immaculate constantly arrived at Niepokalanów. Hardened sinners abandoned vice, broken marriages found reconciliation, young people discovered their religious vocation, and entire families consecrated themselves to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Each letter of thanks confirmed Father Maximilian's prophetic intuition. The Immaculate used the magazine as a privileged instrument to extend her kingdom in souls. Beyond the main magazine, numerous specialized publications were produced in Niepokalanów: magazines for children, missionary bulletins, devotional pamphlets, and books on spiritual formation. Father Maximilian understood the need to reach all sectors of society, with messages tailored to each age and condition. His apostolic vision encompassed everyone, from the youngest children to intellectuals, workers, peasants, and urban professionals. The organization of Niepokalanów reflected the founder's practical genius. More than 600 Franciscan brothers worked in perfect order, each in their assigned post, from typesetters to administrators, writers and proofreaders. Community life unfolded faithfully following the rule of St. Francis, with long hours dedicated to liturgical prayer and personal meditation. It was a living demonstration that personal holiness and apostolic effectiveness were not only compatible, but mutually nourishing under the maternal gaze of the Immaculate Conception. Chapter 9. Mission in Japan. In February 1930, moved by a supernatural impulse he recognized as inspiration from the Immaculate Conception, Father Maximilian embarked on a missionary adventure that astonished even his closest collaborators. Accompanied by 4 Franciscan brothers, he set sail for Japan, a country then virtually closed to Christian influence, where Catholics comprised less than 1% of the population. The undertaking seemed reckless, but the holy missionary knew that Mary, the Immaculate Conception, desired to extend her reign to the land of the rising sun as well. The journey through Siberia and China proved long and arduous, especially for Father Maximilian. whose health had deteriorated considerably due to tuberculosis. However, every difficulty became an opportunity to offer sacrifices for the conversion of pagan peoples. During stopovers in major eastern cities, the group of missionaries distributed thousands of miraculous medals among passengers and residents, thus sowing the first seeds of Marian apostolate in distant lands. Their arrival in Nagasaki in April 1930 marked the beginning of an apostolic enterprise that would bear abundant and lasting fruit. Despite not knowing Japanese and having minimal financial resources, Father Maximilian immediately threw himself into the evangelizing work with the audacity of the great saints. His first concern was to establish a Franciscan community to serve as a base for future missionary expansions, seeking suitable land to build a convent dedicated to the Immaculate Conception. In May 1930, just a month after their arrival, he launched the Japanese edition of The Night of the Immaculate under the title Seibo no Kishi. The publication, carefully adapted to the Eastern mentality and sensibility, presented Catholic doctrine with a Marian focus that proved especially appealing to the Japanese, a people traditionally respectful of the maternal figure. The first issues were received with surprising interest, and soon letters from readers began arriving, requesting more comprehensive instructions on the Christian faith. Father Maximilian's tireless activity soon led to the establishment of Mugenzai no Sono, the Garden of the Immaculate, a Franciscan convent located on the hills overlooking Nagasaki. From this missionary base, the Polish Franciscan brothers, aided by the first Japanese collaborators, extended their apostolate through lectures, distribution of Catholic literature, and works of charity. When Father Maximilian returned to Poland in 1936, he left behind a flourishing Christian community that would heroically withstand the persecutions of the war and become a breeding ground for religious vocations throughout East Asia. Chapter 10. The Return and the Expansion of the Apostolate Father. Maximilian's return to Poland in 1936 was greeted with immense joy by the brothers of Niepokalanów, who had faithfully continued the apostolic work during the founder's 6-year absence. The City of the Immaculate had grown considerably, both in the number of religious and in infrastructure, becoming one of the most dynamic Catholic centers in Eastern Europe. The magazine, The Night of the Immaculate, maintained its million-copy circulation, and expansion projects multiplied under the visible blessing of divine providence. Upon his return, Father Maximilian found a European landscape profoundly transformed by the economic crisis and the rise of totalitarian ideologies that threatened the foundations of Christian civilization. Atheistic communism was spreading from Russia westward, while German National Socialism was preparing its plans for territorial expansion. Faced with these ominous clouds gathering on the horizon, the Holy Franciscan understood the need to intensify the Catholic apostolate and strengthen souls in faith for the difficult times ahead. One of the most ambitious projects he immediately undertook was the installation of a radio station in Niepokalanów. Radio broadcasting then represented the most modern mass communication technique, and Father Maximilian genially intuited the apostolic possibilities of this medium. Radio Immaculate began broadcasting in 1938, reaching not only all of Poland, but also neighboring countries, with programs of religious formation, sacred music, and news commented on from the perspective of Catholic social doctrine. Parallel to these technical projects, Father Maximilian dedicated long hours to the spiritual direction of the numerous pilgrims who flocked to Niepokalanów seeking advice and comfort. His reputation for holiness had spread throughout Europe, and many afflicted souls found in him the spiritual father capable of guiding them along the paths of Christian perfection. His advice was always simple yet profound, invariably centered on devotion to the Immaculate Conception as a sure path to Jesus Christ, The last years of peace were also years of intense literary activity. Father Maximilian wrote hundreds of articles, pamphlets, and letters that constitute a true treasure of Marian spirituality. His mystical theology of the Immaculate Conception, developed through profound meditations and supernatural experiences, shed new light on the understanding of the Blessed Virgin Mary's role in the economy of salvation. These writings, imbued with supernatural unction, would later serve as the doctrinal basis for the development of Marian devotion in the 20th century. Chapter 11. The War and the Nazi Persecution. September 1st, 1939. German troops crossed the Polish border, initiating World War II and plunging Europe into the most terrible catastrophe in its history. Poland, once again facing its tragic fate, became a battlefield between foreign powers, suffering under the occupation of armies that respected neither human dignity nor Christian values. For Father Maximilian and his brothers of Niepokalanów, a period of trials began, one that would culminate in the supreme testament of Christian charity. The first German bombing soon reached the vicinity of Niepokalanów. Father Maximilian, with the serenity of saints in difficult hours, organized the evacuation of part of the community to safer locations, but he himself refused to leave the City of the Immaculate. Along with some brave brothers, he remained in the convent to protect the apostolic work and continue, as far as possible, the evangelizing mission that the Immaculate had entrusted to them. On September 19, 1939, German authorities proceeded with the first mass arrest of Father Maximilian and 40 other Franciscan brothers. The pretext was the alleged anti-German activity of the magazine The Night of the Immaculate, which had repeatedly denounced totalitarian ideologies and defended the rights of the human person according to Catholic doctrine. The religious were taken to the Auschwitz concentration camp, where they experienced for the first time the brutality of the Nazi regime and its systematic hatred of all things sacred. During the 3 months of captivity in Auschwitz, Father Maximilian became an angel of consolation for all prisoners. Regardless of nationality or religion, his presence radiated a supernatural peace that eased the physical and moral sufferings of the deportees. He secretly celebrated Holy Mass, confessed the dying, distributed his meager food rations among the weakest, and sustained everyone with words of hope based on faith in divine providence and the intercession of the Immaculate. On December 8, 1939, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, the Franciscans were unexpectedly released. This event, which many interpreted as a special grace obtained through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary, allowed Father Maximilian to return to Niepokalanów and partially resume apostolic activities. However, the situation had become extremely precarious. Most of the facilities had been confiscated, the printing press closed, and the community reduced to a small group of religious living under constant surveillance by the occupying authorities. Chapter 12. Auschwitz, the Saints' Calvary. On February 17, 1941, the Gestapo again raided Niepokalanów to make the definitive arrest of Father Maximilian. This time there were no specific pretexts. The mere existence of this priest, whose spiritual influence extended throughout Poland, constituted a threat to the Nazi project of uprooting the Christian faith from the Polish people. Along with 4 other Franciscan brothers, the saint was taken to the dreaded Pawiak prison in Warsaw, a prelude to the extermination camps, where the Hitlerian regime carried out its diabolical plan of systematically eliminating the Catholic intelligentsia. On May 28, 1941, after 3 months of torture and humiliation in Pawiak, Father Maximilian was deported to the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, which had already gained sinister fame as a place of mass extermination. He was assigned the number 16670, branded on his left arm as a symbol of Nazi contempt for human dignity. However, For him, that number became a mark of honor that associated him with the passion of Christ and prepared him for the supreme sacrifice he sensed was near. The living conditions in Auschwitz surpassed everything imaginable in terms of cruelty and human degradation. Prisoners were subjected to exhausting labor under the supervision of sadistic guards who found pleasure in the systematic torture of the deportees. Food was insufficient, housing was inhumane, and death was a daily companion that visited the barracks, taking away dozens of victims each day from hunger, disease, and mistreatment. In this earthly hell, Father Maximilian became a living image of Christ crucified. Despite his health being weakened by tuberculosis and the sufferings of captivity, he became a father and comforter to all the prisoners who approached him seeking a word of hope. He secretly celebrated Holy Mass with miraculously obtained scraps of bread, confessed the dying, distributed his meager rations among the neediest, and kept the flame of faith burning in the thickest darkness. The German guards, bewildered by this figure who radiated serenity amidst the horror, subjected him to special abuses reserved for Catholic priests. They forced him to carry heavy timbers reminiscent of the cross of Calvary, brutally beat him when they caught him praying, and assigned him the most arduous tasks, hoping to break his spirit. But the Franciscan saint responded to each outrage with a meekness reminiscent of the divine Lamb, offering all his sufferings for the conversion of sinners and the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Chapter 13. The Supreme Sacrifice. In July 1941, an event shook Auschwitz, providing Father Maximilian with the opportunity to perform the most heroic act of charity of his life. A prisoner had managed to escape from barrack number 14, and according to the camp's implacable regulations, 10 deportees from the same section would be executed as retribution to deter future escape attempts. Commander Karl Fritsch proceeded with the fatal selection, arbitrarily choosing 10 men who would be condemned to die slowly of hunger and thirst in the underground bunker of Block 11. Among the condemned was Franciszek Gajowniczek, a sergeant in the Polish army and a family man, who upon hearing his name burst into desperate sobs, crying out, "My wife, my children!" These words struck like a dart into the merciful heart of Father Maximilian, who immediately recalled the vision of the 2 crowns he had received in his childhood. The time had come to win the red crown of martyrdom through the supreme act of love that consists of giving one's life for one's brothers. Without a moment's hesitation, the Franciscan saint stepped forward to the Nazi commander, and with a voice calm yet firm, uttered words that would become etched in history. "I am a Polish Catholic priest. I am old and sick. I wish to take the place of this man who has a wife and children." Astonishment painted itself across Fritzsch's face. He was unaccustomed to such generosity in this place of death. After a moment of hesitation, he accepted the exchange with a dismissive gesture, deeming it inconsequential which prisoner perished in the death bunker. On July 31st, 1941, Father Maximilian descended into the subterranean cell, accompanied by the other 9 condemned men. That dungeon, destined to be a scene of horrific agony, was transformed under his influence into a sanctuary of prayer and hope. The saint organized the spiritual life of the group, leading communal prayers, chanting Marian hymns, and preparing his companions for a Christian death. His voice, weakened by forced fasting, resonated in the darkness like an echo of divine charity. The German guards, accustomed to hearing groans and lamentations from the death bunker, were dumbfounded to hear religious chants and prayers rising from that cursed cell. Father Maximilian had managed to transform the place of punishment into a cenacle of sanctification, where 9 souls prepared for their meeting with God under the guidance of a true saint. After 2 weeks of agony, when only Father Maximilian and 3 companions remained alive, The executioners decided to accelerate the end with a lethal injection of carbolic acid. On August 14, 1941, the eve of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the martyr of charity surrendered his soul to God, fulfilling the prophecy of the two crowns and winning for the Church one of the purest glories of its saints. Chapter 14. A Prayer to Saint Maximilian Kolbe. O glorious Saint Maximilian Kolbe, heroic martyr of Christian charity and tireless apostle of the Immaculate Conception, you, who from childhood were chosen by the Blessed Virgin Mary to receive the two crowns of purity and martyrdom, intercede before the throne of the Almighty for all of us who confidently resort to your powerful intercession. Help us to imitate your ardent love for Mary Immaculate and your heroic generosity in the service of God and neighbor. Saint Martyr of Auschwitz, you who knew how to transform the place of greatest horror into a school of holiness and a testament to divine love, teach us to find God amidst the trials and sufferings of our earthly existence. Grant us the grace to offer our daily crosses for the salvation of souls and the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. May your example of Christian fortitude sustain us in temptations and encourage us to persevere faithfully on the path of evangelical perfection. Tireless apostle of the Immaculate Conception, you who consecrated your entire life to extending Mary's reign in souls, obtain for us a sincere and profound devotion to our Heavenly Mother. May we always turn to her in our spiritual and temporal needs, trusting fully in her maternal intercession. Help us to be docile instruments in her hands for the conversion of sinners and the sanctification of Christian families. Glorious confessor of the faith, you who did not fear confronting the atheistic ideologies of your time and valiantly defended Catholic truth, grant us the courage necessary to bear witness to our faith in a society increasingly distant from God. May your word and your example inspire us to be consistent and committed Catholics, capable of positively influencing our family, professional and social environments according to the principles of the Gospel. O Saint Maximilian, spiritual father of so many souls and model of holy priests, pray for our pastors that they may be worthy imitators of your apostolic zeal and your generous dedication to the service of God's people. Intercede especially for religious and priestly vocations, that there may be no lack of laborers in the Lord's vineyard willing to work for the extension of Christ's kingdom under the maternal protection of the Immaculate Conception. Finally, dear Saint, when our last hour arrives, assist us with your comforting presence and help us to surrender our souls into the hands of the Heavenly Father with the same serenity and trust with which you faced martyrdom. That through your intercession and example, we may one day behold in eternal glory Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, in the company of all the saints. Amen. Saint Maximilian Kolbe, pray for us. Immaculate Conception, Queen of Martyrs, pray for us.